Hello and welcome to the Mariana Dalto Show, the podcast where small business owners share their stories, insights, and strategies for success. Today's guest is someone who turns data overwhelm into decision-making power. Jenna Moser is a certified board design PA and founder of JWORKS Virtual Solutions. She helps financial advisors, bookkeepers, and other service providers eliminate data chaos and make clear, confident decisions through tailored dashboards. If you ever felt lost in spreadsheets or unsure which KPI to trust, this episode is for you. Welcome, Jenna, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And this is such an important topic because people really get overwhelmed with data, or they don't even know where to start, or maybe they have the data somewhere. So this is a good way of, maybe having a different thought process about why is this important. So, but let's start first with you. What inspired you first, Jenna, to transition from public accounting to entrepreneurship? What drove you to get your own business?
Yeah. So that big shift happened in 2020, which may have happened to many of whoever is listening, since this was the start of the global pandemic. But not only was it that for us, but it was also the birth of our first daughter. And so that's when like everything changed for me. And I realized that I wanted to build a business that gave me both freedom and impact. And so I left corporate and moved back to my hometown. And that's when I started my business from scratch. And within a year, I hit six figures. And so I realized that I wasn't just building websites or fixing back-end systems. Like I was helping CEOs actually run their business with confidence. And what started with tech and systems, it turned into something way bigger for me. And I was stepping into the role of fractional COO and strategic data partner because I was helping businesses lead with clarity, clean up that chaos that we talked about at the beginning, and then finally feel like they had control again. And so I was constantly seeing the CEOs putting out fires or unsure what to fix first and drowning in decisions because like ultimately they were the bottleneck of their business and they didn't need more to-dos. Like they needed a real foundation and the visibility to lead. So now I help CEOs build those businesses that are profitable, simple, and sustainable. And actually, I am still a bit of a number nerd. I love puzzles, board games, and some weird fun facts. If you ever want to hear a wild story, ask me about the time I fell off a bridge during a hike or got engaged in a hot air balloon.
Oh my goodness.
Life's definitely been a ride, but I feel like it's really shaped everything that I now bring to the table to help like my clients. So yeah,
That's great. That's good. And then so from a client standpoint, so you say you work with CEOs and operations too, like CEOs as well?
Well, that's kind of the title, self-designated title I gave myself is just like a COO, just helping them with their business, like operational wise, or just with their back end processes and things like that.
So when we're talking about processes, I will focus in more on the marketing and sales processes, or there's other processes that you are also helping the leaders in the companies to get clarity on what data they need to manage, visualize in order to make decisions.
Yep. So I would say definitely sales and marketing. But then also like what are those key areas that are kind of like driving all those different areas? So we look at financial and the sales and operations, but also like their team and how their team is operating, so that they can, truly maximize what they have.
Okay, so that's a lot of data because we're talking about financials and teams, so that's a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the biggest mistake business make when it comes to tracking data? What is it like? the tools, not tracking the data, not knowing what to track? What are the key things that you're like, okay, let's do an assessment first where you're at, just to
Yes.
start working with you?
Yep. I feel like there's three different things, like three different areas when it comes to data. So you're either not looking at your data because you're afraid of what it's going to tell you, or you are too overwhelmed at the amount of data because you don't understand it or you're not sure how to interpret what it's telling you. Or the third is like you just don't know where it is, like it's scattered everywhere in several different places, and you're not sure kind of either where to pull things or how to bring it all together to then ultimately make a decision. So
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like I'm sure everyone has data everywhere from, if you work with QuickBooks and you do your accounting, and if you have your CRM data, your own
mm,
Excel sheets trying to track stuff, that's where
yeah.
people get like, okay. Plus the tracking piece, like I don't know if you help with automations too, in order to not to do a lot of hand holding and, inputting
Mm.
data every day, right?
Yeah, so I used to be, yes, in the weeds of like helping them fix or set up automations and processes like that to kind of pull in their data or do different things. But now I'm trying to like step back and just help them figure out what those should be, and then their team can then execute and create those for them. So
So that means you come in from a strategy standpoint.
yeah.
Okay, this is where you are today. So do you do some sort of assessment? How do you start working with them in order to understand where they have
Yep.
gaps, or how can they work with you?
Yep. So I normally start with what I call my growth assessment questionnaire. And so I send them a list of questions that kind of helps me get an idea for where their business is at, where they want to go. And then kind of do a deep dive into their data and come up with a like custom roadmap for them, and what are those key areas that they need to be tracking so that they can then reach the goals of where they're wanting to go. But it starts with you got to first figure out what your goals are, and then I try and help them create a custom roadmap so that they can then start tracking what they need to.
Is there specific growth revenue that you think that people like, okay, once you're starting making this amount of money, then you need to start for sure tracking your data more consistently? Do you have some sort of advice on that? Or it's just like day one, start tracking day one?
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say the earlier the better, right? Because like it's hard to scale something when the foundation is broken or just not even there to begin with. So I would say like it's not too late to start, but I would say the earlier you start, the better, so that whenever you are ready to scale, you already have that system in place, and it'll just help you get there faster and hopefully a lot easier because you're already seeing, what's working and what's not, and you can capitalize on that momentum.
Yeah, I always say, like, as a coach, I always talk to my clients about, like, in order to understand what's not working and how to help you move forward, I need to look at the data. I
Yeah.
need to see where is the gap where something is not working. Something is broken within your system. So
Mhm.
you have a system. So in order to understand how to fix it, we need to see the data. And that's where everyone looks at me.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so good to know that, to have this conversation, because in order to help, like, as a business coach, like I need to see the numbers. I need to see where you're at. And a lot of people like miss that part of tracking the
Yes.
numbers.
Yep. I like to say, well, I mean, I'm not the only one that says this, but I like to say like you can't scale something that's broken. And so like
That's right.
you can throw marketing at it, you can hire more people, you can, build another offer or two, but like if your back end is a mess, like all you're doing is scaling your stress, because you need that real foundation, and it one that like shows you where your time, your money, your energy are like actually going, so that you can like step out of the weeds and lead like the CEO you are. Otherwise, like your business is going to be running you, and you're not going to be running your business. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then from all the data points that you help them track with the dashboard and the tools that you provide, what's the one metric that you think it's commonly misunderstood by CEOs, but it's vital in order to really like, and I know you track so many things, but is there one metric that you're like, oh my gosh, if this one is off, then you know, everything is broken.
Oh, that's a really good question. I like to think there's like not one thing that could break everything. It's normally like a combination of things, but I would say anything like around your lead generation, so like your cost per lead or your like opt-in percentage or conversion rate, like anything that's going like that is affecting those areas is going to be, because like that's the top of the funnel, right? So if that's broken, then like everything else underneath that is going to be broken. So I would say if you can really nail down those at the top, then everything else kind of like falls into place, versus like trying to fix things at the bottom. But like if you're broken at the top, it doesn't really matter. So I would normally say like try and focus on those specific ones, but again, every business is different, but that's kind of like my go-to.
And then is there a way that when you help clients that did you find a way to simplify complex financial data to those clients that they are not technical clients? Like, did you find a way where like, okay, this is my step that you won't be overwhelmed because I'm taking you through A to C, whatever it is. Like, do you have a kind of like a simple process that you can kind of walk the team through or the audience?
Yes and no. So I kind of have a framework that I like to use, and it's kind of broken into three areas. So first is we collect all the data, right? And then we connect it. So bring it all together like in one place. So that you have one like visual center to see kind of, what's working, what's not. And then
And
we
that's
kind
the heart attack. That's where the CEO looks at the data. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this.
yes. Yeah. And then we clarify what that means and teach you how to read your story essentially and make decisions from that. So I think most CEOs are like visionary people, right? So how I bring this all together for them is in a visual like dashboard, so to speak. And so you're able to, and like most people can say like, oh, if something's going up, like that's good, or going down, kind of showing you visually how things are tracking. You may not understand like the exact numbers or how this affects that, but over time, like by looking at it every day or every week, you get familiar with it and start to see trends of like, oh wait, this used to always go up and now it's going down. Like, what does that mean? Like you start to like kind of notice those things. Whereas if you're not even looking at it, you don't know is going up like normal or is something broken, right? So I think when you have a visual kind of board to look at and start seeing trends over time, it becomes easier to understand your data, and make decisions from that. And you also have me to coach you and give you advice along the way in that strategy, of like, hey, this isn't working. Like these are, XYZ of what we should try to do differently. And it's kind of, just going off of what the data is telling you. So
Yeah, and the trends are, this is key. Like, Grant always talks about this, and even um, me working, large corporations, we were, of course, big data, and I
yeah,
was in market research, so I had data all over the place with me. But looking at the trends gives you the idea of what's working and what's not working, and also why there's variations within the year. That why do you're always down within this time period? Like what happened? You can start doing research in your own business. What happened that the numbers went down this month or this week or whatever? So you can dig deeper on
right.
what needs to be fixed, right?
Yeah.
But first, looking at the trend and the graphs helps you have better understanding how you're doing overall. Like instead of looking at the numbers one by one, because that's where the key is, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not just like about having more and more spreadsheets. Like some people think like, oh, the more spreadsheets I have, the better. But like that just adds like confusion, overwhelm in of itself. So I would definitely, yeah, like if you can notify those, especially if you're like a seasonal business, like if you start tracking your numbers and you get to a month that's like a lot lower than maybe you have like 1 month that's lower and the next is higher. But like if you understood like, oh, you know, around this time I'm usually going to be lower, you can plan for those things because you already know like this is normal for your business, right? But if you don't know that your business, you know, is higher in the spring versus the summer, like you might not
Right.
plan for those, and then you're going to have cash flow issues. And so, you know, just being aware of those things is crucial to your business. But if you're not, you know, looking at that stuff, you might not know that. So a lot of heartaches can be prevented if you just knew, you know, what is upcoming and can plan for that ahead of time before it hits.
Yeah, and you know, I know this answer, but I'm going to ask it just so for the audience to listen to this. So
Mhm.
how often do you think that service providers should look at their dashboards and their data? I know the answer, but I'm not
Yeah.
gonna.
So, I mean, ideally daily, I mean, kind of depending on like where you're at in your business and the volume you're doing. Like if you know, if things are changing significantly daily, then I would recommend daily. But most of the time I would just say at least once a week, just so you don't get to the end of the month and are surprised at, you know, how things turned out. Like that way, if you are starting to see, oh wait, we are not on track to hit our goal, then you can make those pivots along the way versus waiting until the end of the month and be like, oh wow, we really overshot that, or oh wow, this, you know, campaign was not performing like we thought it would. You're able to make those decisions real time versus, oh shoot, we just lost a month because, you know, we weren't looking at this and didn't realize it was broken or not working or, you know, whatever. So you lose whatever momentum that you are building or could be building if you're not looking at it frequently enough. Some people are looking at it at the month end or, you know, not at all, but I would definitely say at least weekly if you can, just to get a pulse on for where you're at. Is
And
a
then
good
if you're
idea.
starting weekly and you're kind of like just you're kind of new in your business, in your service-based business, what are the KPIs that matter most that, okay, if you're just starting out and you need to start tracking data and you're gonna do it weekly, what are the KPIs that you're like, yeah, for sure, look at this to get you started?
Yeah. So obviously sales, everyone needs to track sales, but I would really, if you're new, like focusing on like your website traffic or your funnel, whatever your like your leads are coming from, I would focus on that area to, you know, figure out what is converting and what's not. Are people opting into your funnel? If you're, I don't, you may or may not be running ads depending on if you have the capital, but what is that cost per lead? So that you can, you know, make adjustments early on because obviously like if you're new, you want all the attention, right? So you want whatever's capturing those leads to really be strong. So I kind of mentioned it in the beginning, but anything around lead generation is going to be a really good idea to track. And I mentioned sales, but not necessarily just like sales overall, but like sales by product if you have more than one, so that you can really focus on like what is giving you the highest margin and like putting all your energy to that versus something that is not very profitable, but like taking up most of your time, right? So I would, you know, try and track those different areas for sure.
And is there, so you work with bookkeepers, financial advisors, right? So those are kind of some of the key clients. Is there a specific advice that you will have for them, yeah, in order to scale their services? Do you have something that you're like, oh, this always comes up in my conversations when I work with them from a
And,
scaling standpoint? Or
um,
maybe not. So I don't know. That was just it doesn't have to be like something I don't know. Sometimes like I see when I coach people, certain things come up all the time. It's just like a
Mm.
normal because it's the process of like helping people with certain problems and I see those coming
Yeah.
up, you know, and that's why maybe from a tracking data standpoint, maybe there's like, oh, there's always a miss on this for this type of services or this type of businesses, they always miss this or whatever, or maybe not. So
Yeah. So that I actually have a bookkeeping client that their offers were selling, but their leads kind of got stagnant and they weren't growing like they thought. And their back end was honestly chaos. And they didn't actually know which of their offers was profitable. And her team was at capacity, like they were maxed out. And so we were able to clean up her workflows, build that, real-time business view, like I mentioned earlier. And she realized that most of her energy and her team was going into their lowest margin offer. And so just by realizing that one insight, she was able to shift like how she spends her time and can now make decisions with clarity. So she not only was experiencing like better like profit margins, but now she was feeling way more powerful again in her business. Like she was able to actually make decisions that were moving the needle. So kind of goes back to like tracking your revenue by product so that you aren't spending time that, it's wasted. Like it's actually going to something that is going to really boost and scale your business. Because sometimes it might not be the offer that you want to spend your time on, but if it's what is really driving your business, like that's where you need to focus your attention. But if you don't know that, then you could be wasting time and losing a lot of revenue by focusing your areas or by focusing your energy elsewhere. So I would say definitely, not looking at your offer profitability and where you're spending your time and energy for sure.
Okay. And then so tell the audience about the calculator. So you have some tool that you want to give for free to the audience. How does that help? What does it do?
Yep. So it's kind of for like maybe you are a little bit about data, or you realize, oh shoot, like I maybe should start tracking your data, but you're not sure either where to start or what is going to be important for your business. My KPI metrics calculator is a great place to start. It helps you define those key numbers, even if you're not a data person, and it explains like what different metrics are. Like you might hear different, buzzwords on social media about, like ROI or CPC, like different things like that. And it really explains like what those are and how to track them. And it allows you to kind of, play with your numbers to figure out, if you have a certain goal, like what should you be looking for in these different metrics to reach your goal. So it's a great place to start if you haven't started tracking your data before and are looking to get started. It kind of gives you that starting point without overwhelming you with a ton of spreadsheets and numbers. So yeah.
Good. So we will put the link for that calculator in the show notes. So for the audience, if they're interested to take a look, to start exploring, if you haven't done this yet, it could be a good way to start at, dipping your toes in the water for those that they don't track the data as much. So, well, thank you, Jenna, so much for your time. Thank you for explaining the audience about spreadsheet overload and overwhelm, and it's been really helpful. And hopefully this little masterclass that Jenna gave us on clarity and confidence can help the audience to move a little bit closer to track their key metrics, and the calculator could be one of those steps. So thank you, Jenna, again for your insights and for the value that you provide to the audience.
Thank you so much.
All right, and for the audience, before we wrap up, I wanted to let you know all the data from all the contact information from Jenna is going to be in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to her, have questions, feel free to contact her. All the information will be there with her website and the free resource. And then if you love this episode, thank you so much for sharing with anyone that could be benefit from these resources. And we'll see you next time. Thank you again for tuning in.